No war is over until the enemy says it's over. This statement works in not only just war, but also with things like domestic violence. I came across an article titled Tragic End Despite Protective Order, Family Tragedy Unfolds in Walker County. And this is a story that you hear often in America about these people that get these protective orders against their husbands, their boyfriends, or whoever, and it doesn't end so well for them. So I'm just going to read through this article, and then we'll talk about it at the end. An estranged husband killed his wife and father-in-law and fatally injured a family friend before taking his own life in Walker County on March 8th. Russell David Payne, 54, of Marietta, shot and killed his 54-year-old wife, Jacklyn D. Payne, and his 79-year-old father-in-law, retired Georgia State Trooper Eugene Jack Denny, on Saturday night, March 8th. The Paynes were separated and living apart. Jacklyn Payne was living with her father. Russell Payne also shot and critically injured a family friend, Chickamauga police officer Charles Chuck Snyder Dunn III, before turning the gun on himself and killing himself. Dunn succumbed to his wounds in the hospital on Thursday, March 13th. The Walker County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene at Denny's house on Wood Station Road on Rock Spring about 7:10 p.m. after a 911 call from one of the victims. Sheriff Steve Wilson said. Russell Payne arrived at the residence by vehicle, got out of his vehicle, and began firing into the rear of the residence. He then entered the residence before he continued shooting. So the TPO had been issued. Jacklyn Payne filed a temporary protective order petition with Walker County Superior Court in early January, asking for protection from threats she said her husband had been making for over a year. Threats had escalated and had become more frightening in December of 2024, she said in her TPO petition. Both Jacklyn and Russell Payne were living with Jacklyn's father at the time. On February 4th, a month after Jacklyn filed her petition, Walker County Superior Court Judge Don Thompson issued a protective order stating that Russell Payne was to leave the residence on Wood Station Road immediately and stay away from it and from Jacklyn for a year, from February 4th, 2025 to February 4th of 2026. The TPO ordered Russell Payne to maintain a distance of at least 150 yards. I don't know why they put 150 yards from a residence, because that is not that far. I mean, they should tell these people they have to be like 5 miles away or something, unless there's a reason they need to be closer. So anyway, he was required to stay 150 yards from the residence and from Jacklyn and her children, and he was to turn over any keys, door openers, and security devices that he had to the sheriff's office, which would in turn give them to Jacklyn. Russell Payne was also ordered to turn over any firearms he had to the sheriff's office. A month after the court order, Russell Payne showed up at Denny's home and started shooting as soon as he stepped from his vehicle, and didn't stop until he had killed 2 and injured 1, and then took his own life. Dunn, according to Wilson, was a longtime family friend of the victims, Mrs. Payne and Mr. Denny. Wilson said Dunn was not in uniform and not on duty at the time of the shooting. According to Jacklyn Payne's petition, which detailed the events leading up to her request for the protection, on December 26, her husband waved a knife in her face, stepped on her toes hard enough to keep her from escaping, poked the knife into her thigh, and threatened a bloody Christmas. When the couple's 2 children were visiting the next day to celebrate Christmas, her husband continued to be troublesome and lunged at their son. Payne and his son ended up wrestling on the floor. Jacklyn and her daughter tried to separate them, and finally the son and daughter left the house. On December 28th, Jacklyn asked her husband to move out in order to pay his rent, and offered to pay his rent for another place to live. He responded by yelling in her face and saying he should have killed her already. He pulled out a 9mm gun and pointed it at her, then at his own head. Jacklyn wrote that she ran from the house and called her husband's parents. She and they had been trying to talk her husband into seeking help. She wrapped up her petition by writing, "I am no longer safe and need protection to keep him from coming back." Okay. These orders of protection, these restraining orders, They are not bulletproof. The cop cannot be there 24/7. I know women they think this is helping, they think they're doing the right thing, but more often than not, this happens. The way this one ended with her being shot by the dude, that's often how this stuff ends. And in that situation, she did exactly what she was supposed to do. It didn't work out right. But this is what they tell people to do, and she did exactly what she's supposed to do. The only way you really can avoid this is you literally have to get far away and let them not know where you're at. And that's sometimes not as easy as it is to just say that that's what you really need to do. But I had a friend who had an abusive husband, and she was at home. They had two little kids, like 2 years old, 4 years old. And the husband, or I think it was just a boyfriend, I don't even think she was married to him, he came home one day from work and said, I'm going upstairs to get a cigarette, and I'm coming down here, and I'm going to kill you. And she believed him, grabbed all her stuff, grabbed the kids, and just ran with whatever she could grab. The one kid didn't even have any shoes with. And they just left the house, and they went to some place in the city that found them a temporary place to stay, and she eventually moved to a different state. And it wasn't until her kids were about like 15 and they were on social media that the guy found them. And at that point, he had just gotten out of jail in Florida, and enough time had passed. It had been like 10 or 12 years. Enough time had passed that he wasn't anymore, wanting to come kill her. But her only thing was to literally escape the situation and move to a different state. And luckily she found some program or some group that was willing to help her get out of there. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. He had made enough threats that she believed him that he was going upstairs to smoke a cigarette. When he came down, he was going to kill her, and he said it, and she believed him. And this is, it turned out good for her. And she never went the restraining order route. Restraining orders, I don't remember what the percentage of it is, but I know that when you get the restraining order, the percentage of when it's going to go bad. So say out of all the 100% of people that get restraining orders, 75% of the ones that are going bad within the first couple weeks. If you get a restraining order and you can get past those first few weeks, you're probably okay. But the first 2 weeks statistically are not good. That's when it often escalates the situation to a point where that this happens. And this is not uncommon. I do a lot of stories like this. And this one I thought I would do a longer video on. I do shorter videos on a lot of these. But people really need to know when they're in a situation like this, it's hard to get out of that situation. But you maybe need to make a better plan than just the restraining order. Because I say in all these videos that I do like this, restraining orders do not stop bullets. They're just pieces of paper. And like the quote I said at the beginning of this video, no war is over until the enemy says it's over.